What's up, SEM Rush, and welcome to this episode of Weekly Wisdom. My name is Mikhail Alfon. I'm the president and co-founder of Blue Light Media based in Costa Mesa, California. And today we're going to be talking about how to use and find micro influencers. Now, before we get into that, let's talk about influencer marketing as a whole. It's one of the most popular ways for brands to really reach new audiences. Essentially what they're doing is they're using influential Instagram users or YouTubers or whatever platform it might be to help promote their product, service, or brand, whatever it might be, right? And what they do is they find people who can actually encourage their audience to sell their products for them. Now, when you're starting your influencer marketing campaign, it's important to understand the difference between a macro influencer and a micro influencer. Macro influencers will typically have hundreds of thousands of followers, if not millions of followers, and tend to be a little bit more expensive and generally a little bit more difficult to solidify campaigns with. But this is for the small to medium-sized businesses, and we're talking about micro influencers today. And micro influencers are going to have typically under 20,000 followers. You can push that up a little bit to 30,000 or 40,000, but let's talk about under 20,000 followers. There's a lot of benefits to using micro-influencers. For example, they typically get higher engagement rates, which is really important. This is one of the key performance indicators when measuring a influencer marketing campaign is how well the content is actually performing for that influencer. They're also more likely to engage with their audience, which is going to drive more conversations about your brand or product, and you'll typically get higher conversion rates as well. And obviously, the higher conversions, the better, and that's what we're all shooting for. One of the things that we love about using micro-influencers is that they're typically more flexible with deliverables and how we're going to formulate the campaign. You can kind of work with them as opposed to, just really being a slave to price or what a macro influencer might do. So being flexible is definitely really important. And one of the major things that we love about working with micro influencers is it actually helps fuel the content production process. So for example, any of the content that they're producing, we can use that on multiple campaigns. When you're searching for a micro influencer, there are things that you should definitely be looking for before attempting to solidify a partnership. One of them is the quality of their content. Now, it's not just talking about photos, but also their captions. So let's take a look at photos first. Does the imagery that they are producing, does that actually resonate with your brand? Does that look like something that you're going to share on your own profiles? That's definitely something that's very important to look at. In addition to that, let's talk about their captions. You don't want an influencer who is just, putting up one line that doesn't really have any substance to it. When we're working with micro influencers, we really want to look for captions that do have a lot of substance, a lot of heart, and a lot of meat to it. And the reason is that typically will drive more conversations, and it shows that the influencer is intentional about the content that they're producing. So definitely look for those key things when it comes to content quality. The other thing that you want to look at is their engagement. How good is their engagement rate? What you can do is you can divide their engagement by their followers and multiply it by 100 to find what their engagement rate is. And you want to look for at least 20% engagement rate for micro-influencers with up to 10,000 followers. Now, once you cross 10,000 followers, there's something weird that happens where the engagement rate does drop significantly. So after 10,000 followers, look for at least a 5% engagement rate. Another way to measure their engagement is whether or not it's authentic. So this is going to take a little bit of research, but tap into their comments and look at what their audience is saying. Does it actually relate to their photo? Are they asking questions about their captions? Those types of things are very important to look at because comment pods, and if you're unfamiliar with comment pods, they're ways for influencers to actually drive engagement inauthentically. Comment pods are still something that happen on Instagram. So by looking into the type of engagement that they're getting, you'll get a good feel of whether or not your campaign is going to be successful. Now, one of the most important things, if not the most important thing to look at is the influencer engaging with their audience back. When you're working with an influencer, you want them to be an advocate for your brand and somebody who's really going to help sell the product for you. So you want to see, are they going in? Do they care about their audience? Are they answering questions for them? And are they continuing the conversation outside of just that post? Now, another thing you want to be looking at when you are choosing a micro influencer is seeing how much branded content they have out there and how it's performing. So branded content are any past collaborations that they might have had with a company or a brand or anything like that. Go into those posts. How does their audience engage with it? Right? So are they asking questions about it? Does the influencer engage back and tell them how great the product is and why they're supporting it in the first place? Look at the type of content they're creating for the brand as well. Are they just, taking a picture of themselves holding up the brand, or is it a video where they're actually using the product that they are helping promote? These types of things are really important to take into consideration because, again, these influencers aren't just a way to reach new audiences, they're a way to create new advocates for your product or your brand. Next, we want to talk about how to manage the influencers once you find the ones that you want to work with. One of the best ways to manage your influencers and the content they're providing for your company is providing an influencer brief. This influencer brief can be a short deck or a handout that includes the do's and don'ts of creating content of your brand. For example, you can say that your brand shouldn't be pictured next to alcohol or shouldn't be pictured in certain scenarios, things like that. You might want to tell them exactly how your product works as well so that when they are using it or they are wearing it, whatever it is, they're actually using it correctly. In addition to that, you can also provide content examples, and this is a great way to make sure that you're getting the high quality content that you need and that you're paying for. So send them examples of either content that's been provided for you in the past or what you want to create based off of different aesthetics or different influencers that are creating content as well. Be sure to include the required hashtags, and you also want to include any product information too so that the influencer is super familiar with exactly what your product does, how it benefits them, and how they can communicate that to their audience. When you're managing your micro influencer, make sure you have an approval process as well. So this is where they're going to share the content with you before it actually goes live, because the last thing that you want are any mistakes in the content, any misclaims, whatever it might be. So be sure that the influencer is actually getting their content approved before it actually goes live. Now, lastly, when you're managing your micro-influencers, be sure to support them. Remember that this is a partnership and not just somebody working for you. So share their efforts on Instagram stories, on Twitter, or whatever it might be, or even make announcements that you have new micro-influencers working with you and your brand. Now let's talk about measuring your influencer campaign. This is obviously one of the most important aspects of managing your influencer initiatives, so make sure that you do it right. One of the things that you can do is use track links. Bitly makes this really easy, and you can use a unique track link for every influencer that you're working with. In addition to that, you can also use a unique UTM code for every single one. You want to make sure that you know exactly where your traffic is coming from, so using these codes are definitely going to help you do that through Google Analytics or any other analytics tool that you're using. Lastly, you can also use a promotional code. If you're asking the influencer to sell the product for you, obviously you want to see what type of impact that's having on sales. So these unique promotional codes can be used on Shopify, they can be used on Squarespace and Amazon to make sure that you know exactly where the sales are coming from. Now, in addition to these hard metrics, you also want to look at some of the qualitative things as well, like what is the engagement like with the content that you're putting out? You're not necessarily going to get a conversion overnight, but sometimes if you can tell that the content or the influencer is resonating well with that person's influence or with that person's audience, you can actually jump in there as the brand and help push that conversation along. So check out what the engagement is like. See what the content is like. Are you getting enough content to maybe fuel campaigns in the future? These things are also some of the aspects that you want to take into consideration with your influencer campaign. It's not just about sales. There are so many other metrics that you want to look at. All right, so now you have all the tools that you need to start your micro-influencer campaign, but before we leave you today, we want to talk about some final tips and strategies. Now, campaigns that are done over a long period of time, like 60 or 90 days, typically perform better. And the reason being is because to that influencer's audience, it doesn't seem like they're just hawking a product. It seems like they're actual advocates of the brand or the product that they're helping promote. So make sure that when you are creating your briefs for the influencer, it spans over 60 to 90 days, multiple posts, Instagram stories, whatever it might be, in addition to the other platforms that they're using as well for added benefit. The other thing that we suggest is to make sure that you create unique packages for all of these influencers too. Create a branded box, add some swag in there, whatever it is. These types of things are gonna get the influencer excited, and when they're excited, they're gonna create better content for you and promote it even better, but make sure that there's something unique for every influencer that you're working with, because at the end of the day, they are putting